well, I'll go ahead and get us started since you all are joining us on your lunch break today. But welcome everybody to the Job Searching in a Challenging Market virtual panel discussion today. For those that I have not met yet, my name is Marissa Miller, and I serve as a career counselor within the Office of Career Development and Corporate Relations in the College of Engineering. And I'm so excited for you all students to meet our wonderful panelists today. Before we get started, a couple small housekeeping items. Students, throughout the session today, I would love and welcome for you to ask questions to our panelists. The best way to do so, if you want to use the chat function on Zoom, just to send me your specific questions, and I will help moderate just to keep us on track during our time together. Also, students, if you would be so kind to keep your mics on mute, just so we can hear what everyone has to say. We are also recording today's session. And so after today, I will happily send out the recording link to each of you, but we will also have it available to students that may not have been able to attend live today. And so just know that all the great information you'll hear today will be in your inbox after today's session. But just a little bit of an overview today before I hand it over to our incredible alumni and panelists. So as we know, a lot of you are currently job searching and or exploring different career paths, different occupations. And with the current status of the pandemic, there's a lot of uncertainty. And so we have invited our panelists today, some of whom actually were in your exact shoes several years ago in the last economic downturn, as well as some that were in kind of the middle of their academic curriculum plan at Auburn University, and just wanting to hear from each of them today about strategies and resources and ways for you to have a successful job search, even in the midst of such uncertainty. So today I just want to help welcome three of our incredible young alumni from the engineering college, and I will allow each of them to introduce themselves, and then we will get rolling with questions. So without further ado, we have Joseph, Jordan, and Jessica, and that is going to be the three J's for today. So panelists, whoever would like to get started, if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about yourselves and maybe helping to paint the picture of where you were at in the last economic downturn in regards to your career search and job search.
Sure, I can go first. I am Jessica Metcalf. I graduated in May of 2012 with a chemical engineering degree. So when the last economic downturn was happening, I was just starting out in engineering, actually. I will say that when I was job searching, although I'm sure there were more jobs available than there were in 2008, 2009, I still felt like that we had some of the effects of the economic downturn still during that time. So hopefully I can help answer some of your questions as well. But I currently work for Southern Power, who's the wholesale part of Southern Company, and I live in Birmingham.
All right, my name is Joseph Moore. So I graduated aerospace engineering in 2008, and then went on to Purdue to get a master's degree. So graduated from there in 2010, and since have been working for GE Aviation. Right now I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm a process improvement leader. So I'm responsible for all of the standardization and improvement activities that go on in our global 3D printing base. So I graduated probably about 6 months before things got really bad in 2008, and I was in graduate school. So I was insulated from the full-time market, but not from looking for internships. I interned the summer of 2008 between undergrad and grad school. And then I interned again in 2009 between my first and second year of grad school. And then along the lines during that time also was interviewing for a job to come out. So I was trying to enter the job market right in the teeth of it, along with, a lot of my other classmates. So yeah, very much looking forward to kind of hearing the questions you all have today, and hopefully giving you some good information for how you get through this time.
Thanks, Joseph. I'm Jordan Ross. I work for Hoare Construction down here in Orlando, Florida. Worked there my entire career. I graduated civil engineering in '09, and then 2000 got my master's in 2011. So like Marissa was saying, and Joseph was saying, I was kind of right in the teeth of the recession. December of '09, people were trying to keep their doors open, had laid off a bunch of people, and so I'm, anxious to tell you how that experience has improved me over the time, and how, I have a different perspective than a lot of people in the industry, just based on, the scratching and clawing to get jobs.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much. So just rolling off of that, Jordan, if you wouldn't mind, maybe if each of you could share what were some pivotal moments during your time that really helped you in terms of staying motivated in the search process, and also what maybe would be strategies or tips that you can give to our current students that are currently going through the search process.
So I guess Marissa, I got a job hunt twice. So the first time, I got into civil engineering thinking, everybody was coming out of there with 5 and 6 offers from companies. They basically got to pick. They got to, create bidding wars between companies. And, that's the juniors, seniors, that when I was a freshman, that's what they were reporting back. And then, crash of 2008 happened. And I think my graduating class in December had, 3 out of 42 of them had jobs, lined up at graduation time. So it was a scary time. We knew it was a scary time. I mean, everybody was, where do I go? Do I go back with my parents? What do I do? And so, I had two interviews. Both of them were trying to create a position, and both of them were because, basically we just laid off a bunch of high-priced people. You'll come in, you can work. And unfortunately, neither of them created a position. So I went and spoke with, I guess, my favorite professor at the time, Wesley Zach. And he offered, I had never thought once about graduate school. I didn't think I was graduate school material, to be quite honest. But, it ended up being a great deal for me. I got to do a research assistantship, get my MS. I really learned about myself during that period, and kind of how to self-motivate and work on this project in the background, and really treat school like it was a job, which, undergrad did not see me doing that. And then by the time I was getting my master's, I was more mature than the current, the current undergrads, and was able to, have a couple of jobs, even at a time in 2011 when it was, there was a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. It was definitely still not a great time. And I think Jessica kind of mentioned that. So, I mean, the biggest thing is this is going to force a little bit more maturity on everybody. You're going to have, when we're looking at resumes, and this is going to be a little bit different, but we don't want to see gaps. We want to see people who are go-getters, who are ready to go out and find stuff. So, if that stuff is working a job in the field and doing some labor. I mean, that's, for me in construction, that's the greatest thing I could see. I even would rather see that than the formal internships a lot of the time. So, I mean, it's just, what are you going to do to be creative and to show me you're a go-getter?
Yeah, I'll echo that as well. Like I said, I graduated in 2012, so it wasn't right in the middle of the downturn. But, I went into engineering the same way. We thought that there's no way that you're not going to have a job offer, especially if you keep your grades up. But that wasn't the case for several people that I graduated with, even 2 and 3 years later. I think it's important, though, to realize that your first job out of college doesn't have to be your dream job per se. Any experience is good experience. And for me, I'm in a completely different career path than where I started. I started in a manufacturing facility as a quality engineer with Michelin. I was lucky to have that job offer when I graduated. So I didn't really have that gap, but at the same time, I wasn't sure that that's where I saw myself in the long term. But what that gave me was invaluable experience, and it gave me so much material to be able to pull up during an interview. So I would just echo that no experience is bad experience.
Yeah, for me, I'd say, there is a lot of emphasis that gets put on, hey, it was a downturn in the economy, and industry suffer, but 2008 was also the year of a presidential election. And so I got in aerospace engineering because I wanted to work for the space program. And you all probably have seen the news and saw, that SpaceX just sent 2 people up to the space station on their private capsule. Well, during the Bush administration, while I was in school, NASA, the government, was still developing products for the space program. And that's kind of the job that I was lining myself up to do, to go and work for NASA and to work in manned spaceflight. And so that change in administration actually meant that there was a change in plan, and they decided to privatize it. And at the time, I didn't think I wanted to go work for a private company. So even though, programs were still going, there was a shift sort of in the strategy that I had to make and kind of ask myself, hey, do I want to go work in one company versus another? So being in grad school helped because it gave me the ability to go get some internships and to try some different things out and to try out whether or not I'd like to work for a private company. And so I was fortunate to get connected with people at GE, and working for jet engines became almost as cool as working for rocket engines. So it was a really good kind of transition and fit, but it made me think about a little bit differently kind of about my prospects and how I wanted to work. And then within that, I had a couple different jobs in different divisions. And so I finally ended up settling on, working in manufacturing. So after I went through my whole journey, I went up and had an aerospace engineering degree. And then I, got a master's degree in aerospace engineering, working on solid rocket propellants, and had all this experience down that line. And my first job out of school was as a supervisor on second shift at a small shop in North Carolina, doing machining, milling, and lathing on parts. So it was completely different from anything I ever thought that I'd be doing while I was in school. But I found a passion that, that I really enjoyed. And that has led to me, later on in my career in the job that I have now, where we'll be talking about, what we're doing with metals and additive manufacturing and the lasers and what's going on in the melt layer. And I can actually recall my experience with solid rocket propellants, where we've got a melt layer, and be able to use that experience in what I'm doing today. So the experience and the skills that I gained are being used. They're just used in slightly different ways.
It's really helpful to hear each of you say the importance of experience, the importance of finding and developing a skill set, finding and developing transferable ways to take what you have previously done and apply it to that next adventure, if you will, that next experience. And Joseph, you just touched on kind of getting into my next question. So when each of you mentioned finding experience and not having a gap on the resume, but also almost re-strategizing what that experience may look like for you. What would each of you give as maybe some advice, or what have you done and found success in relation to keeping up with industry trends, in relation to keeping up with and almost kind of strategizing the next step ahead? How can our students be proactive in understanding what the industries are looking for now, but also where is the growth going to be long-term?
Right. It changes, so quickly. Even in a 4-year time frame from the time you get to college, or even in those last 2 or 3 years from the time you start your major to the time that you end, it changes so much. But one of the things that I've been telling students, and it started even before the downturn, and Jordan mentioned it when he was talking about, working in the field, it becomes about the skills. The skill set that you have is much more important than the job titles that you have, because the skills are what we're after, and the skills are transferable from one company to another. So I work, in the supply chain now and work in manufacturing, But my very first job I ever had was at McDonald's. And never would I have thought that I could equate engineering and McDonald's together, but the folks at McDonald's are masters of the supply chain. Everything that they do to make a lean assembly line and everything that goes into making your sandwich, that I can put an order down the same assembly line and it can have all types of variation in it. And there's not multiple assembly lines for every sandwich. Like all of that stuff is directly quantifiable to what I do now in the supply chain. So any job that you have, you can gain skills. If you're working in hospitality, that means that you're working with people. That sometimes means that you're dealing with people that aren't in their happiest state. That's helpful when you're in a manufacturing environment or when you're working with a customer who's not happy. That translates directly to customer support. You may have jobs where like, you're working in the field and you're doing the manual labor. Now you have an ability to knowledge, you have ability and knowledge that you can call upon that your operators or your users of your technology that you're going to develop, you have that same skill set. So you're able to apply that. So every job that you're in, now's the time to be thinking not so much about your job title and how big the company was, but to be thinking about the skills that you gained from that job. And that's how you should start to describe what it is that you do. Not that you're a collection of jobs, but that you're a collection of skills, and those skills have value to multiple industries and multiple companies.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I just think that it's so important for employers to see that you're a hard worker. That's really what they want. They see on your resume that you have an engineering degree. Well, most people that are applying for that job probably have an engineering degree. They want to know that you're going to put the time in, that you're going to learn, and that you care about the work that you do. And that has led me from one position to the next throughout my career. It's just that I am a person who kind of puts my head down and does the work. I guess another point about that is that a good quote that I heard recently is grow where your feet are. So, it may not be exactly where you thought you were going to be at this time in your life, but it's just as important to make everything out of the situation that you're in, to get everything out of it, to get all the experience that you can out of it, because there is no way that any experience that you have is not going to transfer to a future job. It's just like what Joseph said. It's just as important to know how to deal with an angry customer as it is to know how to do certain calculations for a job. All of that matters.
So those are two great answers. Tough to follow. I'll echo what Joseph said. When you're in that role, look around, ask questions, learn, because your set of your skill set will grow immensely. If you're in McDonald's, ask why we're ordering this much. Ask all these questions. If you're on a job site, watch what happens, because that is the best experience. And then, like Jessica said, there is no room during, these economic times for entitlement. Your hands have to get dirty. Like, you have to go and find it. So I mean, that's the biggest thing. And I'll just offer, as well, our company, we deal with a lot of hospitality and a lot of attractions down in Orlando. And Orlando's economy is kind of based on those two things. A trickle down from the theme parks, basically. And so we have to reinvent ourselves to, what markets within Orlando and within the country are building right now. And that's kind of the same question that you guys need to ask is, not everybody's hurting through this. Not many companies are growing. So like Joseph said earlier, the government will probably spend a lot more money during this time. So it's kind of that smart research to narrow down your search and start thinking, okay, where are jobs being created? And I'm sure the Career Development Office can help with that. But think about, the Amazons, the tech companies of the world who are still doing really good work. Because like Jessica said, it doesn't have to be your dream job. You're going to gain super valuable experience no matter what. And it's not just, vocational experience. It's what do I want in a company? what is this? You know, how did I negotiate? What could I do better the next time I negotiate? So think about all those things.
I think that that's super helpful to hear, Jordan, when you mentioned is when we're embarking on a job search, not only does a full-time job search feel like a full-time job already, but being intentional with that research, being intentional with focusing in on what are the values that you're looking for in a position in a company, who is hiring, that would be the obvious one, but then also how is that going to affect me long term? And so each of you have already mentioned some of your previous roles. And so could you kind of each shed light on maybe what was that very first role like for you post-graduation, and how did that role really set you up for success in that trajectory of where each of you are now in your current roles and positions?
So my first role out of college was a quality engineer with Michelin. So I was in a manufacturing facility, and basically my job was to ensure the quality of each tire that left our facility. One pretty interesting fact that at the time they made us do as incoming engineers is we had to build tires for a week. So I was on their shift, that 8-hour shift. I was there at 7 a.m. and I was out on the floor and I was building tires with all of these people who, had been doing it for years, and it was hard work. I mean, like, I was physically sore after doing it. So to me, that was kind of a turning point, I guess, for me, was I realized, okay, to really understand what's going on, I've got to get out with the people who are actually doing the work. I know as engineers, we're kind of put your head down to the paper and do the calculations, but it was so important to be able to understand what they were doing as they were making the product. And I also figured out through that they respected me more because they knew that I understood their job too.
Yeah, that is vital, Jessica, for sure, being able to translate that experience. My first job was as a supervisor, so I was on second shift in a manufacturing facility, and I joined a rotational program with GE. So over my first 2 years, I had 4 different jobs in 4 different parts of the country where I'd move every 6 months to kind of gain a holistic view of our supply chain. So I was hired in basically to be paired with another supervisor that had been working there for years. That supervisor was fired about a week or so before I started. So there were actually 2 of us that were, well, I was 23, I believe, he was 21, and we ran the whole facility at night. We were the folks there to make sure that things got done. So that experience was vital right out the gate because I had to learn how to be a leader, and there was no one with experience to ask certain questions. So it was a lot of experimenting that happened on the job. I'd try things, I'd get to try to make certain decisions, and I come in the next day and talk with my manager and with the plant manager, and they tell me these are the decisions that were correct and these are the decisions that weren't, and here's how we pivot from this. But it really helped me in that environment because I had to lean on the group that worked for me to help me out because they knew how to do the job. They knew what they needed in a given night. So a lot of times it would be me coming to them with the plan and saying, hey, what do we need to do to get this done? And them walking me through it and letting me know what it is that we need to do. And then me doing my job of breaking down the roadblocks for them so that they could get the work done over the course of the night to get us to the next night. So for me, I got a good solid leadership foundation kind of starting out in that first role. Got a good understanding of, how you deal with people when you're in an environment that you're not familiar with, because I had no idea how to run a mill or a lathe or any of these machines. So for me, a lot of learning, but also a lot of understanding of what it takes to lead in that type of environment. And that's really set me up for the progressive supply chain jobs that I've had going forward, having that experience from the start.
So for me, I've kind of signed on to a job that, on a job site that created that was really two roles, in a normal climate combined into one. I, it was tough. We called them 36-hour days. But it's the most fertile learning ground I could have imagined. Like, think about, to use a college football analogy. I was a true freshman who was not ready to play, who got shoved out there, on a big stage. And so it was, I made a lot of mistakes. I had to ask a ton of questions. I didn't know a lot of what I was doing, but I wouldn't trade that time for anything in the world, because you learned a lot. You saw it, your learning capacity was so much more kind of right in the beginning. And so I learned how to work in the business world and how a construction site worked at the same time.
Thank you all. And thanks for the college football reference. We all are needing that. Looking forward to that. So just to kind of transition a little bit into the search itself and the current climate, what students are or have been seeing in the last few months as they've really embarked on their searches. Would each of you mind just giving a short kind of industry insight? What's kind of happening in your world at the moment? What are you currently kind of working with and seeing? And then with that too, what would be some advice, right now for a student? They have applied to positions, they are waiting to hear back from companies. What would be kind of one piece of advice of how to follow up or how to be even more strategic with their search?
Sure. So I'm in the aviation industry, and you can imagine it's been pummeled pretty hard, because who wants to sit inside of an airplane next to a whole bunch of strangers they don't know for hours? So kind of from a pure numbers standpoint, when we were in like the March timeframe, air travel was down. So where there'd be 5 million travelers in the country on a given day, there were 200,000. Where international travel coming to it from the United States fell 96%. So we only had 4% of the flights going. So it was interesting, for one, because our Asia is one of our big bases, you could actually see the spread of the virus as we were seeing different pockets around the world of what was going on with air travel. China saw it first. We saw their inter-country travel go down, and then we started to see international travel go down as they were restricting movement coming into and out of the country. And so we were able kind of to see it, and with that we hit our low point, and now we've kind of slowly started to recover as an industry. But the expectation for us is that it's going to take a few years. Honestly, the air inside of an airplane is very clean. There's so much filtration and stuff that goes on that's some of the cleanest air you get to breathe. But the public perception is, again, that I'm next to a whole lot of people I don't know, and who knows what's going on in that tube that I'm stuck in for the next 2 hours. So I don't want to risk it. So we're very much geared up on the commercial side for a bit of a downturn. At the same time, the government has increased spending because they see this as an opportunity. They're saying there are all these companies out there that make stuff for us, and they're not making stuff for the private sector now, which means they can make more stuff for us. So it helps them kind of bolster the economy of the U.S. and of the globe. And then it also allows them to get things that they need that maybe wouldn't have been a priority in the past because they were a government customer. So we're actually seeing the business grow by maybe about 10 or 15% on the government side for us. So it's created internally kind of a change in strategy, as a lot of people are switching from working for things that benefit Delta, United Airlines, to working for things that benefit the U.S. military or benefit our global military customers. So with that kind of spreading through the entire market, I think one of the things that's changed for people that are interested in the aviation business is that they probably now need to look for folks that have heavy military presence in their business. That's the area where they should be looking right now, because that's where things are going to be a little bit more stable for the time being, and that's where they're going to find more opportunities to be able to do the things that they want to do during this time. And we would expect that within the next 2 to 3 years, things will start to kind of return back to normal, And we were on these record-setting growth paces before this. So from here, we would expect those sorts of trends to kind of continue again in 2 or 3 years.
From the power company perspective, our goal right now, from what we're being told, is to cut costs as much as we can. You think about, a lot of people are at home, so power is not something that's going to go away, but at the same time, large businesses have been shut down, so they're no longer using power and things like that. I 100% see that this is going to bounce back. As far as a timeline, I'm not really sure. I think once people start going back to work and things kind of start getting back to normal, maybe by early next year, hopefully, I definitely see that our job market's going to pick back up. We had several open positions when we kind of went into quarantine, and I feel confident that those are going to open back up. As far as advice as to how to move forward, I just think do your research. If there's a company that you're interested in, I highly recommend that you research them as much as you can prior to any interaction that you're going to have with an employee who works there, and especially as you prepare for potential interviews, because I know that in my interviews that I've had with Southern, they will ask company-specific questions, and they will ask things like, well, why are you interested in our company? And you have to be able to give an answer as to, okay, well, I've looked into it, and I know that you have a strong initiative for so-and-so, or, I'm really interested in lowering carbon emissions, things like that. I just think it's important to do your research in this time and really try to figure out what you want to pursue when the time does come. I really feel like the market will pick back up.
So I think I've kind of already mentioned, we know Orlando's a tourist-based economy that has been largely affected. There's big revenue gaps in a lot of the hotels, convention centers, all those things. We don't know when those are going to pick back up or if they're going to pick back up. The parks are opening. Well, Universal's already open. Disney is opening the 11th. So that's at least some good news. We had several projects at the parks that have kind of been delayed or deferred for a while. And so I think I mentioned earlier, we are largely finding new market sectors, finding, data centers, supply chain warehouses, things like that to try and sink our teeth into government work just for us. As far as how to pursue, there's a variety of different ways. I would just say try and talk to somebody and don't feel like you're bugging anybody, because you need a job and they understand that you need a job. So don't ever, try and talk to somebody on the phone if you can. If they don't have any positions, ask them for advice. Where would you go? Because they will have a much broader view of the industry and understand kind of where to look. So try and pursue those opportunities just to talk to people. LinkedIn's a great tool for that. If you can't get through HR, but please don't just send emails. Don't upload your resume through somebody's website and think it's done, because that's, in this economy, there's going to be hundreds of resumes, and there might be resumes that are from people that have 10 years experience. So try and seek out those opportunities to talk to somebody, even send them LinkedIn messages, say, hey, could you give me 10, 15 minutes, just so I can, present myself, and, or you could help me with my job search. So just those type of things. And, Marissa, April, and Jessica, they might not like me for saying this, but bust down their doors. They're there to help you, and they would love nothing more than to steer you in the right direction. And they do a ton of research on this stuff and talk to a ton of different companies.
Yeah, on top of that, I mean, I'd add one of the, if you want to call it the good things about the pandemic, is the vast majority of people have more time. So, you know, like me, I've spent 5 days in the office the last 12 weeks. So that means I'm not driving to and from work, which means, you know, that's an extra hour at least out of my day. So now's the time if you want to get in touch with people. And, you know, Auburn's great because, you know, Auburn alumni base, and I'm one that's included, that honestly, at the end of the day, for the Auburn students, I want you to come work for G, but I don't necessarily care that you come work for G. I know this will be recorded and they'll say something about it, but I want to see you employed and I want to see you happy. Like, first and foremost, that's what I like to see out of the Auburn students. So, you know, I don't mind when someone comes to me and it's like, well, we're not doing anything right now, but I might know someone at another aerospace company, or I've got a friend that works here and they're hiring. I love to send the students forward because, you know, my goal, especially being on the Young Alumni Committee and my connections with Auburn, is to get every single one of you a job somewhere, to get you out there, to make you successful, because that's what makes Auburn successful in the future. So, you know, some of these networks that you're in, don't just think about it as a one-way street that, hey, I'm talking to you specifically about your company. It could be I'm talking to you about this particular industry, and everyone knows people, you know, that they can connect you with. So, you know, don't be afraid, number one, to take advantage of the time, because people have it. And we're going to have it for a little while longer as we go through, you know, these varying states of the quarantine. So you definitely shouldn't feel bashful about asking for a few minutes here or there. And one of the things that you can do, you know, Jordan was talking about, you know, 15 minutes, make sure you've done that research. And Jessica mentioned earlier, knowing the company, do your research ahead of time so that small amount of time is extremely valuable. And if you can do that, you know, successfully, that's going to give you more options. But it may also mean that in a few months, someone remembers, hey, I had a conversation with such and such, and I really appreciated the way that they came in a professional way and they had their stuff together. I'm going to give them a call back now. So, you know, this is a long game for you all. You know, when I was getting out of school, you know, I was definitely under an impression you would see that, hey, I'm probably going to work for the same company for 30 years. You know, just with everything that goes on in the economy, that's usually not the case anymore. And I think companies definitely understand that, hey, you might be with us for 3 to 5 years. We want you to stay for longer, but, you know, we understand. So even if this leads to, you know, a job that, say, maybe is with a different company, as you flex that network, you still can work your way back to, you know, exactly where you want to be in your career. And I think for the current group, you know, with the amount of innovation that's happened for us, things have been moving fast. I wouldn't doubt that it wouldn't be the norm that, you know, folks that are graduating now will work for 3 or 4 or 5 companies, or will work for, you know, multiple different businesses. So, you know, take advantage of this time, do your homework, work the Auburn network as much as you can, and others. Definitely, I will echo that, talking to Marissa and talking, you know, to the rest of the development office, and you know, use those resources to your advantage, because we're in contact with them. I talk to April all the time. We're in contact all the time about opportunities and what we're doing. So, you know, get to know them well.
Absolutely. And thank you all for the shameless plug to connect with us. But to your point, it's fantastic to think about that a lot of uncertainty and a lot of unknown has transpired since mid-March because of the pandemic. But time has definitely almost been an added value, an added bonus, and being intentional with that time. And so for our students, if you've just wrapped up your academic semester or academic time at Auburn, how can you really be effective and efficient with your time now is to develop quality resumes and quality cover letters, and to be intentional about those conversations that you're having through LinkedIn to employers, hopefully to our 3 panelists today, but using that time as an advantage point, but then to connect and to engage, because yes, there may not be an opportunity right now, as Joseph alluded to, but maybe there would be in the future, and you're developing that network and developing those connections. And so just wanted to reiterate that I think that that's powerful, and utilizing our opportunities for students, but then equally reaching out to alumni, using the alumni base. Auburn loves nothing more than to help fellow Auburn folks. And so I think that that's an exciting opportunity for our students. I have a specific question, kind of transitioning from one of our student attendees. Just wanting advice from each of you. So the student referenced, how would you go about if a student were to find a position that maybe they don't meet all of the requirements for? How would you gauge that for a student, in particular, maybe years of experience? So let's say they have 6 years of experience to also include their graduate studies, but the role is asking for 8 years of experience. What would be kind of some advice that you could give to the student?
I'll just say from my perspective that I have never been what you would say fully qualified for any job that I've ever applied for. You're never going to know everything when you apply for a job. I think it's important to just make sure that you let them know, hey, I may not have X qualification, but I'm willing to learn it, or I'm willing to put the time in, or I may not have this extra 2 years of experience that you require, but I do have this skill. I think it's just important to acknowledge that you may not have the certain requirement, but that you're willing to do whatever it takes to kind of overcome that hurdle.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that, right? You know, a lot of times, those requirements, especially when it comes to like years of experience, aren't necessarily hard and fast. But the assumption is that, well, if you've been working for this long, you should have gained these skills. So pay close attention to the skills portion of it, of what the desired characteristics are. What the day-to-day of the job is, and if you can connect your experiences directly back to what they're looking for in that job, that's going to be more what they're after versus, oh, I worked for 8 years and didn't make hardly any impact, but I've been working for 8 years. I meet that requirement. So that's there, but it's there because typically this is the amount of time it takes to gain these skills. And if you've been able to gain them quicker and you're able to pull on your experiences from the past, you'll still have, some level of success in getting those types of jobs.
I think Jessica and Joseph hit it on the head. The skills are what matters, not the years. HR people write those things a lot of the time. The people interviewing you might not even know what amount of experience they're asking for. Obviously, you just want to gauge it and make sure, if a job is asking for 10 to 12 years industry experience and you're a new, you're an entry-level position, probably not the one to apply for. But if you've got 1 year of experience and it's asking for 3 to 5, yeah, you can play. I mean, all day long, you can make that jump. So just, I mean, it's that marketing yourself, marketing your own skills, knowing how to sell, what you learned at McDonald's working versus. Or what you learned, with a brick in your hand, shoveling a sidewalk that you learned that equates to their project. So I don't think you should be shy about applying for stuff like that. Now, if you get any pushback, you might want to look in other places if they have 5 or 6 candidates that you found out that are, have that experience. But you just want to be as efficient as possible with that search.
Thank you all. Another question submitted, do you have any advice for full-time hires who are facing potential company layoffs shortly after being hired?
I think one of the good things about, at least like right now, is a lot of companies have probably figured out what the near-term prospect looks like. And so they're more than likely not going to put a job out there like today that in 2 or 3 months they don't have a need for, because everyone has gone back and rescope, right? Like if you all had graduated in December and you're looking for jobs in December, I think there would have been a better chance that you got your job and then March happened and it was completely unexpected that'll be rescinded. But right now companies are doing a lot of work to rescope and look at their new business profile. As Jordan mentioned with them, they're looking at the new markets. Hey, where can we go? And as they're drumming up that business, that's how they're putting their jobs out there you know, they're based on what they know today. And right now the expectation is probably is pretty strong, you know, that, you know, unless something completely unexpected happens, that those jobs are going to be there, you know, kind of going forward, because companies want to make sure they're cautious about each and every hire. So I'd say the risk of that right now is low. But since the question was, you know, what do you do if it happens? I think the thing to understand is, as you're going through the interview process, make sure that's one of your questions. Ask them, you know, what's the 1-year outlook for the company? What's the 3 to 5 year outlook on the company? So now you know in the interview process that if they can confidently tell you that, hey, our market looks strong, or hey, here's what we're expecting, now you have an idea of, you know, sort of what it is that you're getting yourself into with that particular company. And you can make the decision even before there's an offer letter sent out that, you know, maybe they don't understand their forecast. That's a little too uncertain for me, versus a company that says, no, we did all the layoffs that we needed to do. Now we're trying to grow for the future and we're confident that this is going to be here. So that's actually an area for you today to do a little bit of homework when you're getting ready for a job, to make sure that through the interview process, you understand the state of the company.
All right, we have a couple more questions. So a question just submitted: how valuable are professional certifications in your experience?
So I went through the trouble of getting my professional engineering license. I have a LEED, which is like a green building sustainable license. I think they're important. Different people in the industry value them differently. Because I'm in construction, I have not once put my engineering stamp on anything. I will not, probably. In what I do in pre-construction and you know, kind of evaluating the constructability and the design feasibility of a lot of these things, it is great for me to have that. It's great for HOR to be able to present that I have that and that I can do that. And, you know, I know, you know, at least your professional engineering license right now, I think they're relaxing the standards as far as 4 years of experience. Great time, you know, great time to do that. So I would highly encourage whatever licenses you can get, you know, you start that process, and you know, that can run alongside your job search. And, you know, you can even market that you are, you know, you were trying to get X license. You're aiming to have that by this time. So.
I do not have my PE license. Just with the industry that I was going in and kind of what I planned to do with my work, it wasn't needed. I will say it is not a bad thing. It's never a bad thing to get as many of those as you can, as many different licenses. I mean, like I said, all experience and anything like that on your resume is going to look great. From my perspective, I graduated from undergrad and went straight into the workforce, but I realized pretty early on that that I was interested in the business side of things, and that's kind of where I wanted to propel my career. So I did my MBA while I was working full time. And that's something that when I got my job with Southern Company, I was kind of right in the middle of my MBA, but I was able to put that on my resume that, you know, I may not have my MBA yet, but I'm working toward it, and I can do this and work full time too. So I just think anything that you can do to further your education will help in the long run.
Absolutely. And there are, you know, additional certifications like working in supply chains. You know, there are lean certifications and Six Sigma certifications that come along as well that become really, really valuable, especially as some companies tighten their belts. They may be less apt to pay for training, but if you come in with that training, that becomes a marketable skill. If you're on the business side and you're not necessarily wanting to put forward the commitment of an MBA, you know, there's like the PMP certifications for project management that are also valuable as well. So, you know, there's definitely a lot of certificates even beyond the professional engineering concept of things that you can do to, to improve right now. And at the end of the day, really, get those skills, which is what actually translates. The piece of paper is great, but it's the skills more than anything that you want to get. And also, I think, along the lines during this time, there've been a number of places where portions of their training have been made free because they realize a lot of people are going to be using the platforms. So some of this stuff won't cost you anything to take advantage of being able to get the training now and to get their certificate now and to add that particular tool to your repertoire that you're going to be able to use when you get hired.
I will say one thing I forgot to add was a benefit that I feel like a lot of companies are offering now is that they will aid you in different certifications, and in my case with getting my master's degree, they'll help you financially, and they'll also like in my case, if I had to take an exam during a certain time, they would allow me to be off during that time. So it's something that whenever whenever you are in the process, if that's something that you're interested in, that maybe you could discuss that while you're negotiating your job offer.
Absolutely. We have one last question for today, but it's a neat one at that. The student would love to hear from each of you. What are your long-term career goals and why? It's a big question.
I think for me, I've had, I guess, 4 or 5 different jobs since I graduated in 2012, and I'm just trying to get a wide array of experience to be able to move to a management position. And I have felt that it's been important for me to move around and get experience in different areas, so that when the right opportunity does come up, that I have the skills and that I'll kind of be able to market myself a little better. As far as a specific job, I don't necessarily have one in mind, but I do feel like as I get more experience and more doors open, that I'll be able to put myself in the right position for the future.
Hey, oh, go ahead, Joseph.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to hold out to see how long I could wait and let you go first.
I'll go first if you want me to. I'm very curious what you're going to say.
Well, I don't know. I guess I tell people inside conversations that if they let me run the whole company, I'll do it. But that's, who knows how realistic that is. But what I'd like to do for me is, when I put my passions together, is I enjoy technology. I like interfacing with people. I like the fast-paced environment. So within my current company, there are these people that own a particular engine program. So they're responsible for the development of the engine, the sales of the engine, the marketing campaigns, making sure that it gets produced and out to the customer on time. And once it's in the field, it's serviced. So that's kind of what I'd like to do. I'd like to have ownership of end to end of a project. So whether it's here or wherever I end up, I want to get to the point where I've got the skills necessary to be able to own an engineering project from start to finish, and be able to handle the sales and marketing, handle the engineering, handle the supply chain, and interface with the customers. And that's probably another 15 or 20 year journey for me from where I am today.
No, that's awesome. I don't know that my answer is that polished. Things change so fast in our industry and in all industries, really. Yes, I'd like to lead. I'd like to manage. I'd like to, add value where I can. I mean, this question is so hard because I probably make it harder than it needs to be just because of life changes and your family life and all those things change. I mean, so I don't know the exact route, but I would just love to, lead people and add value is really all I can give, and do something that I'm passionate about. So yeah, not really tied to any certain position or anything like that, but that's a great question. I'll try and figure out a better answer next time.
with our next panel, I'm going to start with that question. Just kidding. But well, as we end our time here today, I just want to thank the three of you, Jordan, Joseph, and Jessica, just for your time today and for engaging and pouring into our students. And also thank you to the students for attending today. Our office within Career Development and Corporate Relations is excited to help you get to your next step. And so supporting you in that process. We are available all summer long via Zoom just like this. So if you would like to meet individually, you can happily reach out and schedule an appointment. And also what was mentioned earlier, so each of our panelists, they considered graduate school at different points. They consider different positions, different experiences. And so our office can help you not only in the job search process, but if you are considering a graduate school program, if you are considering a graduate certificate, if you are trying to figure out how to develop transferable skills to make yourself marketable in the future. Those are all things we'd be happy to support you with and support you in. And so let's just connect after this. And as mentioned earlier, I will send out this recording after today's session so you can watch and rewatch all the great information that was shared. But thank you all again for your time, and thank you to our panelists taking up your lunch hour on Thursday to be with us. And we look forward to working with you all in the future. So I hope you all have a great rest of your week, and War Eagle.
War Eagle.
War Eagle, thanks.
I think Ed should have to answer the what does he want to do when he grows up?
Oh, I think your answer was great. I need to figure that out. I really appreciate all three of you coming on. It was a very enlightening. I just loved your answers and loved your enthusiasm and positive